going to turn the presentation now over to Jessica, and hopefully there are no technical issues.
Thank you. I'm going to start with, I'm currently in the city of Colton. I work under the electric department, but I collaboratively work with the actual city of Colton, and they were able to create my unique position through the electric utility to also assist the city with sustainability. So just to give a little bit of background about the city of Colton, we are a small city, a population of 52,000. We are about 16 square miles with a fleet size of approximately 280 vehicles. And according to the Cal EnviroScreen, we are what is considered a disadvantaged community. And they base this not just on social economics, but also environmental impacts as well. And that is a state of California scoring system, essentially, that they use for funding priorities in the state of California to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So with all of these challenges I just mentioned, City of Colton wanted to progress and create and adopt a climate action plan. So back in 2013, 2014, when I was first hired, my task was to do a greenhouse gas inventory of all of our city facilities and develop a climate action plan, and this was adopted November 3rd, 2015. Basically, the goals were to develop a sustainability plan to grow the city in a manner with the least impacts to the environment. So we use several different organizations to collaborate with who have been essential in progressing our city's greenhouse gas emission reduction goals. And one great organization we work with is the Center for Sustainable Energy. When I first got in contact with them, I applied for a grant essentially to evaluate the fleet here in Colton to see which vehicles would be valuable to replace and look at investing in electric vehicle cars. And they actually attached data loggers to our vehicles once we were awarded this grant, and they tracked the activity and the range of these vehicles and gave us a priority that I could give to our city council and our city manager to say, you know, these are the opportunities here in Colton that can be used. And those data loggers show the evidence of the driving behaviors. And since we are 16 square miles, there really isn't a lot of range anxiety for driving electric vehicles. One thing we also did was the actual electric utility purchased a lease of 2 electric Leafs to set the example, and that was our first time purchasing electric vehicles to get the city staff more comfortable with the idea of expanding their fleets. The company that we used that gave us the grant to evaluate the fleets was called Fleet Karma. And once we went through that process, we were able to secure funds from the Center for Sustainability to expand our purchasing, and being a disadvantaged community, that gave us up to $10,000 that we could secure for future electric vehicles, which we are happy to say that now we are expanding and just got 2 additional electric Leafs approved for our Community Services Department and our Development Services Department. It was important for us to leverage whatever we could out there for grants, and one opportunity came up with the Department of Energy. Being an electric utility, that gave us the advantage because we started our own working group through the Southern California Public Power Authority, where all of the municipal-owned utilities meet once a month to seek out expanding electric vehicle infrastructure in Southern California. So in Southern California, from Banning clear to LA, all the different utilities within that area that are publicly owned meet once a month, and we're able to collaboratively secure a grant by the Department of Energy to place electric vehicle infrastructure that could get somebody clear out to Banning to LA without the fear and anxiety of range anxiety to drive electric vehicles. With that grant, several fast chargers were placed in the corridors that would take you to LA, along with 4 level 2 chargers that we were able to place in our city through this grant. We worked with a company called Green Lots, who does the back-end monitoring for us, and that was another project that we just finished up. We also, during that time, once that project was complete, now that I could track online how successful they've been, we sought more grants to expand that with other projects. And one way we were able to do this was to use MSRC grants. And in the state of California, clean transportation funding is usually matching grants for AB 2766 subvention funds. And with that project, we wanted to try to help our low-income families because of the incentives that the Center for Sustainable Energy provided. We were able to fund a curbside low-income EV charging stations for multifamily, and that was one of our goals. We currently have secured the funding, and we are in the process of installing, so hopefully I could have an update on the success of that. With that project includes education because we chose areas specifically that had high multifamily in it. The infrastructure costs are very expensive for multifamily to invest in EV charging stations, so that was something we wanted to take a lead on and provide curbside charging that would allow the residents or visitors to charge outside. And then with the education piece, we would be meeting with the property owners, creating some type of flyer or being able to present at a workshop about the incentives the Center for Sustainable Energy has for low-income purchasing of electric vehicles. And so hopefully that will be successful. Another opportunity came up with the Southern California AQMD, which is our Air Quality Management District. They saw our efforts that we've been working on here at the city, so they we have a local rep, Todd Warden, who encouraged us to participate in electric riding lawnmowers. So that was another opportunity that came up, and anything that I could apply for, I try to, especially that could leverage our funds. So we were able to first just test out electric lawnmowers, 60-inch commercial grade, and then after that they said, you know what, we want to see if we could get a grant for you to actually own the 2 electric vehicles, because we are in that EnviroScreen score of surrounded by 180 trains that go through here a day, and the air quality is an issue. So we were able to secure free funding for electric riding lawnmowers, an additional $4,000 for other equipment that's all electric to be used for lawn care. So one thing that we did working together was very important to leverage and overcoming obstacles to try to expand our basic sustainability for the whole city, and receiving that support from the utility was a really good leverage for us. And because of the electric vehicles, we enrolled in the low carbon fuel standard, and basically that gives us credits that at some point we could cash out, which would go right back to our residents here in Colton. So far we don't have a lot of money, like LADWP has over $1 million in there. We probably have a good 12,000, so I'm kind of waiting to get a little bit more established in electric vehicle purchasing in Colton, and once we do, once I reach probably $100,000, then I will cash them out so that I could give rebates, extra incentives to get electric vehicle infrastructure into the homes, and also just purchasing electric vehicles at all. We developed an electric discount rate just for our residences or businesses who drive electric vehicles as an incentive, and basically we provide an extra 250 kilowatts in Tier 2 because we have a tier rating system for what we charge for energy, and that gives them a little extra free every month to offset the cost of their electric vehicle charging. We also developed a rebate for level 2 charging for residents and businesses, and so far we haven't had a huge amount of customers participate in that, but we have had 2, and being a small city, we're excited about that because one of our requirements was it did have to be permitted, so we knew that that might not provide our residents, make them not want to get a permit, but we want to make sure that these items are installed correctly in their home. So that was one way we were able to leverage support with also the utility. And pretty much that's everything that I have to share on what we've done so far in overcoming obstacles. And I look forward to any questions that you might have later. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jessica. Lots of questions for that presentation. We'll save those for the end. Right now, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Philip to begin his presentation.
There we go. Okay, I'm unmuted now, so I think everybody should be seeing my presentation here. Okay, great. So my name is Philip Kovernick. I run sustainability projects for Alameda County in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'll be focusing on how we are managing our electric vehicles, and now that we've really expanded quite substantially, how we're managing the energy from all those electric vehicles and the charging stations as you start to grow your EV fleet. So quick background here. Alameda County is located in the East Bay of the San Francisco Bay Area. Our county center is in Oakland. The major cities in our county are Berkeley, Oakland, Hayward. We sort of go out towards the Central Valley of California a little bit on the east end of our county. We have about 9,500 employees at the county, so we're a pretty big organization. So we have about 1,100 vehicles in our main vehicle fleet, not including fire or public works. We have a few motor vehicle shops that run internal car shares for our county employees to use. And we put on a lot. We put about 9 million vehicle miles traveled per year, and we go through about 500,000 gallons of fuel. So I'm going to start by making the quick business case for EVs, certainly a big reason why we're going this direction. The first is cost savings, and I know gas isn't $4.50 a gallon right now, but we're projecting out the cost of gas over 10 years when we buy cars. We really hold our assets for quite a long time, so we don't really pay attention to what it is right now. We sort of look at the trend and say, okay, well, how much is this roughly going to be over the cost of the next 10 years? But even at half the price, it's still a steal to move to an EV. The figures on the right show what your cost savings would be compared to a traditional car, looking at the fuel savings, the life cycle savings of an electric vehicle. And the off-peak and on-peak rates are estimates. I'll talk more about that and the problem that causes in a minute. So for us, electric vehicles are a great fit for our internal car share for our employees. They fit our what we call duty cycles for trips. So most of our employees are checking out cars to go between 40 and 50 miles a day, and that really fits within the range of all the electric vehicles that we have. Our average EV trip is slightly lower, around 30 miles. We definitely want to get that up a little bit. And cost savings are also coming from preventative maintenance. The regen brakes and the fact that there's no oil changes mean that these EVs come in every 6 months for about a 20-minute inspection, and they can get right back out in the field. We don't have to hold them for a longer oil change or anything like that, and there's certainly no cost associated with that. HOV lane access is a real big benefit for our employees checking out these cars. It's a great customer service benefit right there, and they're fun to drive. So the environmental case for EVs, I'm pretty sure I might be preaching to the choir here. Criteria emissions are a big problem for conventional vehicles, especially here in the Bay Area. We have summer spare the air days, which are mainly caused through things like conventional vehicles and gas consumption, gas burning. PM, ozone, carbon monoxide, all big problems for criteria emissions and air quality here in the Bay Area. And finally, the impact of gasoline is pretty intense. When we do analyses that show the full impact of that, you really want to look at the fuel cycle here. So it's called a well-to-wheels analysis, where you really see how impactful using gasoline is. It's not just burning it in your car. That's sort of the last phase of a long process to get gasoline from the ground extracted, processed, and transported to you to use. And that's all really impactful process, about 20 pounds of CO2 emissions per gallon that you burn. So EVs are great for a number of reasons. Obviously, they eliminate tailpipe emissions, which take care of those criteria emission problems, and they also significantly lower life cycle GHG emissions. There's always this myth that I keep hearing out there that some EVs are worse than conventionals or hybrids, depending on which power grid that they plug into. And it's true that there's a difference in impact where they're charging, but there's no point in the U.S. where charging an EV is more impactful than a conventional vehicle. And here in California, we have pretty high renewable standards in our power grid. And so you'll see this graph here comes from the California Air Resources Board, shows how much reduced the life cycle emissions of an EV are compared to a conventional vehicle, especially when you're charging with renewable energy. And the point here, EVs get greener over time. As I mentioned before, the California Power Grid has some pretty aggressive goals for renewable energy, and that is just going up and up and up. Or, if you're using solar locally, we've installed several charging stations at facilities with on-site solar production, and we're going to be adding a few more in the next year with that. And from a local operational impact, if you've done a GHG impact of your operations, it may look something like this. Transportation is over half of our countywide operational emissions, what it takes to keep the lights on and run county services. Employee commuting is the biggest piece of that pie. We're definitely working to address that, but our vehicle fleet is pretty big, and so combined they're over half of our emissions. There's also an external case for moving to electric vehicles. Here in the San Francisco Bay Area, the plan is to get 10,000 battery electric vehicles and 100,000 plug-in hybrids on the road in the next few years. And the governor of California wants 1.5 million zero-emission vehicles on the road by 2025. So someone's going to ask you to do this if you haven't already done it for the environmental reasons or the cost-saving reasons. So recap on what we're doing here in Alameda County. So we have over 60 all-electric vehicles at this point, a number of plug-in hybrids and a couple hundred conventional hybrids, but over 60 all-electric vehicles. We have 66 charge points spread around about 8 or 9 locations throughout the county. They're mixed between public use. Some charging stations, about 40 charging stations, are mixed for public use and the fleet. They both kind of share them. And we just installed another 26 charge points that are dedicated for our growing fleet of electric vehicles. We're installing 7 more dual chargers and our first DC fast charger in the next few months. So you might be wondering how much this all costs. So these are based on our real costs of purchasing and installing charging stations. So the level 2 charging stations that we've installed, and they've all been through ChargePoint. That's the vendor that we've been using. They cost between $3,500 and $6,000 US dollars per station, and so total cost installed is between $13,000 and $17,000 per station, roughly, depending, of course, on whether you're trenching through a parking lot or installing conduit in a parking garage. Big difference in cost there, and dual ports really help keep that cost down on a per vehicle basis. We're putting in our first level 3 DC fast station this winter. And so those are our estimated costs for installation and purchase of that station coming up. And ChargePoint just also announced they have fleet-only stations, which are less expensive than the level 2s. I couldn't get pricing on that. We haven't bought them yet, so I couldn't share our contract pricing on that. Ask ChargePoint, but they should be cheaper. It's basically a less bells and whistles kind of station that's meant to be just for public fleet to help bring down the cost a little bit more. Okay, so I also really wanted to talk about how we're managing electric vehicles and the energy that's associated with that through telematics. Similar to the last presentation that we just heard, they're using Fleet Karma. We're using Fleet Karma as well. We're putting those in all of our all-electric vehicles. They've been great to work with. They're a GPS company that really has focused on electric vehicles and provided a great product for EVs. So I'll show some screenshots about how we're using that. So here are the kind of details that these types of GPS systems will get you. And this is a big metric to track. So for us, we're looking at month to month. It says average end SOC, which is state of charge. So this shows that all of our electric vehicles are going out in the field and they're coming back with about 60% of their battery life left in the car, which is a great metric to capture, and one that you wouldn't be able to capture unless you're working with someone that focuses on electric vehicles. So to me, this says that our electric vehicles can be going a lot farther than they're going right now. So getting at EVs in your fleet is great, and then you want to make sure that they're actually putting miles on them, that they're getting used. So to me, this says that we need to be working with our drivers a little bit more, and maybe our dispatch folks, and getting people comfortable with traveling a little bit farther, putting on more miles on their electric vehicles. And here's a zoom in on one of those. I just chose one. This looks like car 3208, a Nissan Leaf that's in our fleet. And here are some of the metrics that you can get from that. It's starting at 95% on average, which is great, and it's ending at 63%, which is high. And then it breaks down the charging level. It's charging mostly at level 2, but it's also charging at level 1, just kind of plugging into a wall. And this is a great thing to start looking at too. So this is that same car, 3208, and when it's charging by time of day. So in California, we have time of use pricing, which very much affects how expensive or how much it costs to run an electric vehicle, how much it costs to charge it. Whether you're charging in the middle of the day or at night is a big degree of difference. So unlike fueling up your car, where it's the same cost no matter what, fueling with quotes up your EV really changes on when you're doing it. So this GPS is showing that we're doing a pretty good job on this car of moving the charging sessions to occur after the peak period has ended, which is 6 p.m. here in our rate. It looks like we try to plug it in right there at 6, and then it kind of goes down as it gets filled up throughout the night. This is another interesting way of showing what your EV is doing through the GPS system here. So this shows when is it charging through the middle of the day and when is it doing its bulk charge at night. So for some of your EVs, maybe it makes sense to charge in the middle of the day because it means that you can get away with more miles on your electric vehicle. If it charges in the middle of the day, you can get it out for a second time, get someone else to take the car out and put another 40 miles on it. So there are instances where you'd want to do that if you can. And we set up a fleet view in our fleet karma system, which is another helpful way. If you've moved on, if you beyond like a couple of EVs to really where you have a lot, and it becomes an issue on making sure that you're handing out cars that have full charge. This is sort of a quick view on all of our EVs that are geofenced with our GPS in our main fleet centers. And we can quickly pull up what the current state of charge is on an electric vehicle so we don't accidentally give someone an EV with only 29% range left. Okay, so here's some remaining challenges for an electric vehicle fleet, certainly ones that we're experiencing. So accurate cost per mile based on charging location and time of day. That's a big one. So not only does the cost to charge vary based on when in the day you're charging, it also varies by location. So one of our fleet buildings is on one rate, one utility rate, and another one of our garages is at a different utility rate. So the price per kilowatt hour changes based on where it's charging. So we're working with our GPS folks to try to come up with some estimates based on what you charged at this building, which we know it's at this rate at this time, to give us a more accurate idea of how much do we actually spend in electrical charges to charge and run this car for the last 12 months, because California has much more complex electrical rates than just a flat rate. We'd also love to see macro view of charge times and of when things are charging. Like on average, our fleet, how good are we with some kind of metric at moving things to be off peak? That's certainly something that you want to be looking at, and better controls on controlling groups of electric vehicles to set when they're going to charge, throttle back charge levels, just from a macro perspective for doing dozens or maybe even hundreds of EVs at once and setting up charge parameters from a central location. That's something that ChargePoint's working on, and they're getting more into that area, but we certainly welcome it as we grow to even more electric vehicles. How do we charge that not on an individual basis in the car, but through centralized settings? And I also I'll end on this point on managing energy. So once you have lots of electric vehicles in your fleet, managing energy is becoming an important part of that. And so, last year, Tesla has announced that they're getting into that space with battery storage. That's their Powerwall on the left, which goes very well with electric vehicles. And now that Tesla's absorbed Solar City, it goes very well with solar as well. And so we're moving into that space as well. We're working with a company called STEM here in the San Francisco Bay Area to provide battery storage to minimize the sort of peaks that come from using electric vehicle charging. So I'll talk about that last, but I have a couple of strategies here on how we're minimizing the energy impact of 66 charging stations. So one of them is we charge members of the public. We have a lot of public garages that we put charging stations into, and we started to charge a fee for electric vehicle charging. So we did this for a couple reasons. One, to reduce energy usage, and then also because we saw that in a lot of instances our charging stations in our garages were totally full, and folks that were driving all electrics were having a really hard time finding a station to use. And so this fee meant that the people who want it are the people who are going to pay for it, and that was good. So you'll see in January of 2 years ago, we put the fee in, and then we start to see lower energy usage, and then better utilization. The cars are turning around more, and more people are using them. We also turned half of our charging stations in our main parking garage. We have 10 public chargers there. We made half of them. We switched them from a level 2 charge, a more quick charge, to a level 1 slow charge, and allowed people there to stay longer in those stations to spread their charge out throughout the day and reduce those peaks that you'll see. These jagged peaks are very troublesome because they're very expensive. They incur what's called commercial demand charges, which are very expensive. In addition to what you pay for energy, you pay more for those peaks. And so we're always in an effort now to try to smooth those out. So in June of this year, we turned some of those stations to level 1, and you'll see that we start to bring down those peaks by about 20 kilowatts on average, and that's saving us right now about $600 a month just in those commercial demand charges, which has been pretty great. So we're probably going to turn even more of those to a lower charge level. And finally, that battery storage that I was talking about, that system will be targeting those peaks that I was talking about, and basically turning them, instead of Everest-shaped jagged peaks, it's going to make them into more plateaus by shaving off the top and kind of making it a smooth top. That's the system that basically is targeting those, and will disconnect our main fleet center, which has 26 charging stations, 36 charging stations right now. It'll disconnect that building from the grid and run off the batteries during those peak events to help us reduce those commercial demand charges, like I mentioned. And those commercial demand charges are pretty significant. For us, they're over half of our bill, our total bill for our energy right now. So it's pretty substantial. And that's it. So looking forward to Q&A, and thanks for hosting us.
Great, thank you, Philip, for that presentation. Again, lots of questions, so we'll go ahead and just get right into it. The first question for Jessica: how long did it take Fleet Karma to do the evaluation you were referring to in your presentation?
It only took about 30 days. We did have some trouble sending back the data loggers to Canada because of I couldn't explain it, but if it wasn't done an exact certain way, the border wouldn't allow it to go through. So it ended up taking 3 months total, but 1 month was actual data logging.
Okay, okay. So again, to Jessica, how many vehicles were evaluated with this Fleet Karma?
We had 18.
18.
Mm-hmm.
And are the grants still available that you were referring to?
For Fleet Karma, I am not sure, but there's several grants still available through MSRC and through the Center for Sustainable Energy.
Okay. And then a couple of questions some folks had on the multi-unit curbside charging. How did you choose those locations?
I based it on our largest population of multifamily in one location. And we had one area of our city that had over 800 units per multifamily housing area, and those are the locations we chose.
Okay. And a follow-up question to that is how many stations are at each of the sites, and are you future-proofing these sites? Or how are you future-proofing these sites?
So we kind of similar to what Philip uses, EV ChargePoint. Greenlots does the same analytical data through the back end where we monitor the usage. So I'll be able to track, and we charge similar to him, but because we are the utility, we don't need to worry about the back end charges because we control our rates. We're at 20 cents a kilowatt hour that we charge for curbside and the public charging stations we currently have in our city that we put in.
Okay, great. And one last question here. How did you go about picking one brand of electric charging station over another? Was there a methodology?
There was a methodology. So one reason we don't use ChargePoint was we as a group with all the other municipal utilities in our EV working group wanted non-proprietary units. When electric vehicle charging first came out, several companies went under, and non-proprietary meant that once they went under, nobody else could get in there and provide the same type of back-end monitoring that any utility or any city or county would require. So we specifically did an RFP and made sure that it was non-proprietary. So anybody could, open protocol was a standard we adopted. They could come in, and if we decide after 2 years we no longer want to use your services or somebody else is more competitive, anybody can go in and we can pay for that service and Sky licensing for back-end monitoring.
Okay, great. So go ahead and turn over the next questions to Philip. So we'll go ahead and start off with that first question there, or the question Jessica just answered. So Philip, how did you go about picking the brand of electric charging station over another, and what was your methodology?
Yeah, sure. Well, we've been using ChargePoint stations back from when they were Coulomb Technologies. So that was maybe 4 years ago. We originally did it as part of a big regional, actually I think it was a statewide project here. It was a California Energy Commission project that was looking to put an EV corridor, and so we had our stations through that process. And then sort of after that, we really wanted to avoid having multiple systems. It's already hard enough having different kinds of fuel systems and GPS systems, so we wanted to be sure that we were using at least one software backed system. So when we went out to bid later on for more stations, we sort of said that you can be any type of station as long as you're an on-ramp provider and you're running the ChargePoint software. So there are some non-ChargePoint stations that are still connected to the ChargePoint network. So we opened it up that way, and I think that's what we're going to continue to do from now on.
Okay, great. So the next question is, in regarding to the fees that you implemented at those charging stations, do those fees also apply to your fleet vehicles as well as the public vehicles?
No, they don't apply to our fleet. We don't do any fees for our fleet in that way. We definitely want to encourage our internal departments and employees to be using those. So typically we charge per mile and per hour, sort of like a zip car kind of model is what we're doing internally, and we keep those costs as low as possible to really encourage departments to be using electric vehicles as much as possible. The fee for so we only charge the public is the short answer for an actual fee for our charging stations, and that fee was sort of determined as the minimum way to recover our energy costs and our ChargePoint subscription costs.
Okay, so in speaking of your ChargePoint subscription costs, next question is, what are the network fees per year?
Ooh, let's see, you're challenging my memory here. It's a couple $100 per port per year. I can't remember the exact number, and we have it on a multi-year basis. But it's not nothing. So times 66 ports per year, it definitely it's definitely a significant sum, and one of the ways we recoup that is through these fees.
Okay.
And also say that we made the fee, it was sort of we're shooting for a really narrow window here. So we wanted to recoup our costs and then also make sure that it was high enough to get the results we wanted and that people weren't just going to charge for free, but low enough that we didn't compete with the cost of gasoline. That was a real important consideration. We didn't want it to be more expensive to charge an electric vehicle than to run a regular hybrid. And it's very challenging when the cost of gas gets below $2 a gallon. But for the most part, we're in that margin.
Right, right. Trying to find that that sweet spot. So another question on fees pertaining to Fleet Karma. How much are the monthly fees to Fleet Karma, and are the smart charging fees redundant since you have great telematics?
The Fleet Karma GPS fees are comparable to what we're paying for our normal GPS, our conventional vehicle GPS provider. So it's not really any much of a loss for us. We pay for those anyway. All of our fleet vehicles have GPS in them, so it's not more expensive than that. And what was the second question about smart charging?
Yes. Does essentially having those telematics, those EV telematics, does it make the smart charger fee redundant? I'm assuming that's referring to the charge point stations.
Oh, well, that's a little bit of apples and oranges because the fees for our charging stations really apply to public users, visitors to our buildings and our parking garages, and the GPS systems are only in fleet vehicles. So they're sort of tackling two different problems. The GPS in our fleet vehicles is helping us to manage the energy portfolio, kind of figure out when this vehicle is charging, where it's charging, and opportunities to reduce that, in addition to just telling us where the car is. And the fees are sort of looking at public visitors as opposed to employees using our fleet cars.
Right. Great. So next question is regarding back to the telematics. How do you use those to assign or reassign vehicles to your city departments?
We do. Yeah, definitely, we do. We look at that. We look at our fleet management system, which captures odometer readings and traditional gasoline fuel consumption and all that stuff, in addition to daily utilization and annual mileage or monthly mileage. If vehicles aren't being used for departments, we definitely pull those out of service and or reassign them. Yeah, so the short answer is yes, absolutely.
Great. And on the cost side of things, could you talk a little bit more about your cost savings on maintenance regarding the electric vehicles versus the non-electric?
Yeah, I should have come up with a hard number for that. I can do that in a follow-up and ask, just do a quick calculation of time and oil costs. Those are the big ones. It's really, those cars come in, they do a really quick 20-minute inspection, and they get it back on the road. So there's sort of a lost cost of having a car off the road in the shop for a day to do an oil change. So there's soft cost there, and then the hard costs, oil. Motor oil and lubricants aren't cheap, and so if you're replacing it twice a year, that really adds up. And then there's no brake changes. So those are the two big ones. I'll try to give you a hard cost on what that is and put that in the follow-up.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think that was our last question. So Philip, any last words of wisdom for successfully implementing electric vehicles for other fleet managers on the presentation today?
I would definitely say that having a telematics system for electric vehicles is pretty critical. Just having it without there, you're sort of shooting in the dark, and then you're just going to get an energy bill that's maybe double what you were paying before, and you're going to want to know why that is and how to better manage it. So fuel's pretty dumb in the sense that it's one cost, and there's not a lot you can do to reduce that cost. EV charging is certainly a lot more sophisticated, but there's a lot more you can do to reduce that cost and really make the ROI on electric vehicles even stronger, and reduce the environmental and electrical impact of that too. And also, we have we're putting together a little bit of a case study on energy management. Once some of the things that we've been working on come online, that we'd be happy to share, especially battery storage. and the expected energy savings that we'll be seeing from that. We're sort of putting together a case study on that, so that is freely available. We'd be happy to share it with West Coast fleets.
Yeah, it sounds like a great resource to throw up on the electric fleet's website. So thanks. And Jessica, the same question to you. Any last words of wisdom for moving towards electric vehicles for fleet managers?
Well, I just would recommend any opportunities if you are a disadvantaged community like myself, that there are a lot of assistance and funding out there to help get you started, and to not be discouraged of if there's no funding available or if it seems like a daunting task. There's a lot of resources available on the website online to help understand electric vehicles and how to set up a plan to take to your council to get it approved, or your supervisors.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Philip, for taking time to present today. And again, this presentation has been recorded. A copy of it will be made available on the westcoastelectricfleets.com website. If you do have any questions for us or for the speakers today, please do reach out, and thank you all again.
Thanks.
Great, thank you.